Hello, my name is Rachael Summerscales and I am a Master's graduate from York St John University in the United Kingdom. I am a qualified teacher with a specialism in early childhood, but most importantly, I am a mother, interested in how maternal values transfer and feature in professional relationships in early year settings. Today, I want to expose the tensions this presents in our current educational landscape. Participants of this study illuminated a tension that I believe already exists, that we are educating in a climate that favours attainment over attachment. Participants felt that they had little time for exercising their maternal values in professional relationships, as conflicts arise when setting culture does not accommodate these values as a result of political expectations to get children to be school ready. Now, the answer to this is already well documented in the existing and ongoing debate between learning and care. How our education system appears to favour cognitive construction of knowledge over characteristics of care the older our children get. And how in the last 10 years we have seen this message infiltrate and reconstruct professional relationships towards attainment than attachment. Despite participants using their experiential knowledge of being a mother to influence professional adult-child relationships, conflicts arise when they try to put this into practice. I believe that this is because their professional roles reflect caring for children, rather than their maternal role of caring about children, and so care becomes a widely distributed responsibility. Policy revisions over the past decade in the United Kingdom have been built upon two interrelated and existing debates in early education that place significant importance upon progress and performative measures, and these are school readiness and learning versus care. Multiple revisions of statutory assessment has increased the attention on academic outcomes, coupled with rigorous inspection scrutiny and the implementation of testing 4-year-olds in 2021. Professionals adopt a political view of care, an act to ensure that young children acquire key skills and knowledge. But what attachment theory tells us is that young children continue to rely on adults to sensitively and attentively respond as experienced in their mother-child relationships. So how do we continue to offer this when these changes reduce the availability of the adult as professional duties become directed by performative agendas? Statutory frameworks have removed key terminology, such as loving and secure, to define the types of key person relationships that were originally implemented to offer the extension of attachment theory in education, which has now created uncertainty around intimacy. Rationalisation of provision, qualification and governance brought with it a culture of professionalism, prolonging the tension between care and learning that already existed, by drawing attention to those who identify as being maternal, opposed to those who are degree educated. The cognitive and academic ability of what is a largely female workforce has therefore been questioned, where responsibilities extend no further than changing nappies and wiping noses, according to the Nut-Brown Review 2012. These changes can therefore suggest how maternalism and the caring role carry low status and consequently undervalued in practice. So this idea that care is women's work draws upon attachment-based practices to highlight the significance of the mother role, of developing children's emotional well-being. It is only when care is misinterpreted as a done-to act that the value diminishes. This could be evident in early years practice, in which the approach to forming relationships may be adopted under the illusion of administrative or impersonal tasks, choosing to offer relationships that satisfy the educational demands of the sector, rather than seeing the role as being on the child's side. This can be further explored in the context of early education in the 1980s, in which young children were handled by many staff members, according to the Bain and Barnett study in 1980. And it concluded that children received little, close, undivided attention from adults. And what I'm beginning to think is, Are we going back in time? Nell Nodding's theory of care illustrates the relational and intersubjective nature in which relationships form, speaking of substitute care as the approach to reproducing attachment-conforming behaviours outside of the mother-child bond. However, not enough research from nursing or social sciences has discussed the aspect of caring about in the context of education, up until most recently. Dr. Jules Page's work on professional love suggests the focus has shifted back onto how professionals utilise their personal experience to facilitate better emotional and mental support for early years children within their relationships. She speaks of the empathic nature of an adult in early years education needs to be portrayed as if they are compelled to respond with care, rather than the idea that they are paid to care. Sitting beneath the main research question that you can see on the screen was to find out how being a mother impacts on the way that we build professional relationships with children. 6 participants from across the early years sector who met the key criteria, which is displayed on the left of your screen, engaged in online reflective dialogue with me over a period of 4 months. We began with 5 open-ended questions before I asked further questions through email exchange. I asked about their interpretation of relational policy in everyday practice, what they value the most in the relationships with their own children, and how these influence their approaches back in setting. I was really interested in word choices, and through repeated reading and rereading of their experiences, this cyclical analysis allowed me to understand parts of participants' responses, and then as a whole, and really understand what is it like to be in their shoes. I inputted responses into word cloud generators to see if the frequency of words used complement this cyclical process and help draw out key themes. And what this approach exemplifies is that what we say, so our language, and what we think in terms of our understanding are inseparable elements of being in the world. And this is because the same experiences of being a mother, for example, could be seen in different ways by different people from different circumstances. And what this brief summary described is how I adopted hermeneutic phenomenology and its circle of interpretation to achieve a description of a shared reality. So what did I discover? Well, let's start with maternal values. All mothers valued secure attachments the most, and how important it was to them to develop trust, honesty, and the ability to talk openly to support their own children's well-being. The responses collectively supported 2 overarching values seen as a foundation to their mother-child relationships: emotional connection and communication. They built safe places for their children to confide in them with any concerns or if anything was upsetting them. They established a culture that encouraged advice and support no matter how small the problem. They spoke about how they instill morals and behaviours by being emotionally available, based on experience of how to navigate failure. They spoke about openness and realisation that nobody's perfect and we all make mistakes. And they also based their relationships on reality, that we will all encounter disagreements and uncertainty in relationships, and that they know that this is a 2-way street. Honesty is needed in both directions, and if they don't know the answer, then they find out the answer together. And what underpins all these responses is the value of time. Time for connection. It was clear that participants wanted to treat other people's children as if they were their own when they were in setting, using their own beliefs and experiences of being a mother to influence their approach, which corroborated with the idea that mothers are mothers all the time, mirroring those natural and innate attributes presented within maternal discourse. Participants' responses showed an appreciation of the attachment outside of the home environment, and they did this in a number of ways. At handover times with parents, for example, wanting to know, how's the child slept? How have they eaten? Is there anything I need to know about? They also spoke about if the children were happy and content with them in their relationships, that it showed the parents that they were trusted and they were valued as individuals, making them feel a lot happier, leaving them in care of others. And this comes back to that idea that Dr. Jules Page reiterated in her research, where mothers want to leave their children with people who love and care for them. They were also very keen to make sure that they removed barriers to success, hoping that children would have a go and not be scared but learn from failure, and how they mirror connection by giving those children some extra time to talk or listen, or sometimes just even a hug at the end of the day, so that they went home feeling happy, because that was the expectation for their own children when they were in the care of others. However, delivering on this expectation of being an emotionally available adult brought about key tension points. Participants' responses quickly illustrated how unaccommodating performative culture is of their maternal values, with what appears to be distinctly different comments from them in their responses, particularly for those who work with older children. Firstly, that the purpose in which 4 participants interacted with key children had a very product outcome focus, suggesting that they work with children to gather evidence, or only if it was for adult-led activities, so they could demonstrate the skills and knowledge that children had acquired, grouping them by ability and using monitoring progress as a checklist. This appeared to be more common for those who felt like they had additional responsibilities, often feeling conflicted on where they spend their time, and so share the load amongst other colleagues. Which is interesting really, having heard the results of the 1980s study that showed children received little undivided attention when they were supported by numerous adults. Half of participants, who happened to be school-based, raised assessment as a barrier to spending genuine time with key children, in which one response captured the general consensus that their role expects them to focus on academic abilities. This is also captured in the distinct differences in the types of words used, depending on whether the mother worked in a private childcare setting or in a school. Aside from shared words such as support and feelings, the omission of play from school-based mothers' responses suggested again that they saw this as their role to work with children. They tended to use words that suggested conformity than connection, expectations, teaching, learning. So why is this tension a problem? Well, teaching is considered to be a caring profession, yet what the findings of this study could argue is that there is little time left to be that emotionally available adult if you work with older children in particular. And that's not because these mothers don't see it as their role or value it. It seems to be because the political pressure placed upon early academic success negotiates the purpose of interactions and reduces the avenues for them to exercise maternal values in practice. This alone creates tension, where the mothers in this study want to form loving relationships because they do care about children from their own personal experiences of being a mother, rather than simply being paid to care for children. And from an experiential and practice-based level, I think this participant's response that you see on the screen really hits the nail on the head. And that's because even in times when needs cannot be satisfied, that at least it's done in a way that will preserve the caring relation. Although this study only represented a small sample of the workforce, it assumes that their mothering experiences have been conducive to care. The research tells us that the most effective professionals view their role as broader than supporting cognitive development, and that there should be equal emphasis on fostering happy, confident and sociable children. Yet this study concludes that the impact of performative discourse over the last 10 years really leads me to believe that there is less time for participants to engage in genuine conversations or interactions, which could suggest that children's emotional safety and happiness is being overshadowed by learning and progress, which completely opposes maternal values. The role for intimate, loving relationships appears to have been mistakenly adopted as a wider professional duty, in order to share the load, which has led to a product-orientated approach to interactions, to evidence those educational expectations, meaning maternalism may have become somewhat underappreciated. So in the context of this study, there does appear to be a clear conflict of personal and professional identity, and it appears that there is an appetite for it to become more integrated. My parting thoughts to you are that maternal values should not be questioned in favour of academic success. And in order for all of these assumptions to be surfaced, I argue that we need to balance our perspective towards care, place primacy on attachment, and really see this as the foundation for attainment, and care about children, in order to ground maternalism as a foundation to our future generations' emotional well-being. Thank you for listening.